Valheim is not a game I am making any attempt to rush, and you shouldn't either. It's a game you take your time with, savour, live in. It's intoxicating, often beautiful. It's one of the coziest games I've ever played. It's also stressful, foreboding, and stomach churning. You start off in a ring of stones in a meadow. Guided by a talking raven, Huggin, you'll quickly learn what the grand objective is: slaying all of the 5 bosses spread out through the vast, randomly generated land of Valhalla. You'll be given the location of the first boss right off the bat, but from then onwards, you'll have to do some serious exploring to track down the other 4.
We should watch that live on Openly Beta.
As is the case for any good survival game, the opening hours is a mad scramble of chopping trees, foraging, and beating up the wildlife with your bare fists. As you play the game, its systems slowly unravel before you. There is a levelling system for various skills that is improved by doing more of the action assigned to that skill. When you start the game, you'll be able to see a small list of these, but as you keep playing, you'll unlock more by doing that action. For example, mining a piece of rock will unlock the mining skill for you. This system acts as an organic tutorial and also an exploration tool. Learning a new skill in the early game is exciting as you discover a new aspect of the game you didn't know existed before. The crafting system works in the same way. You will start off with an incredibly meagre selection of tools to make, but finding new resources will unlock new crafting options that require those materials, which provide important items for you to progress in a significant way. Locking key progression behind bosses was a smart move. You are free to go out and explore the world however way you please, but it will be a very difficult experience. There are several different biomes in the game, most of which have a boss governing over them. The game doesn't spell this out to you, but there is a very logical path to follow through these biomes. You'll quickly notice that certain biomes are significantly harder than others, and there is an order to tackle them that the game is steadily pushing you down. I cannot stress enough how big the difference is between biomes. You will be seriously punished if you find yourself in a higher level area. The difficulty between them is less of a curve and more of a vertical line. You absolutely could go straight to the hardest boss if you really wanted to, but just walking into the biome it lives in, let alone actually defeating it, would be nigh on impossible to 99.9% of players. I think that this is the perfect balance between sandbox chaos and a streamlined linear game. I would say it's the best of both worlds. Considering that this is a randomly generated world, the game can often feel like it was purpose-made with the way progression is handled. Biome placement, at least for the worlds that I have generated, always felt like it was taking me up a reasonable incline of difficulty. You can do more than just crafting gear in Valheim though. There is a robust snap-together building system in the game, and it is far more than a nice side distraction for exploration and boss killing. It's actually essential in this game. Whereas in a lot of crafting survival games, the building element can be easily cheated, Valheim forces you to create half-decent bases all across the world, and this is a very good thing. I'm going to run through why building bases is essential. Building bases works by first crafting a hammer from wood. You'll then want to create a crafting table that creates a radius around it that you can build walls, roof tiles, and more complex objects like cooking stations, forges, and more. Workbenches allow you to craft more complex gear and weapons, as well as repair all your existing gear. The catch is that in order to do this, you'll need a roof on top of the workbench, as well as walls either side of it. More complex items will need a more complex workbench, which requires crafting the supporting objects within the radius of the workbench to level it up. Then there is the matter of sleep. To craft a bed, you'll need to be under a roof and within the warmth of a fire. Be careful where you place that fire though. You'll also want decent ventilation in your home to avoid dying from smoke inhalation. I don't think I've ever had to deal with this in a game before. It's really cool. Not only does sleeping give you boosts in game for being well rested, it also sets your spawn point should you die. Early in the game, you'll want to make sure that there is a bed nearby, because dying requires you to run back to your newly laid tombstone to collect your items again, but you'll be extremely vulnerable whilst doing so because you're stark naked. A little later into the game, you'll be able to construct portals that offer relatively cheap ways of transporting from base to base, eliminating the need to construct beds everywhere. Problem solved? Not quite, because around the same time of discovering portals, you'll also find your first source of metal. Metal is naturally an extremely important resource that will propel you into the mid-game with a whole host of cool items to build. Not to mention higher level armour and weapons that are pretty much essential for the more difficult mid-game biomes. The problem is, metal ingots and ores cannot be transported through portals. Suddenly, the game opens up in an entirely different way. A giant chunk of the Valheim experience is the problem of logistics. Your original base may be full of fancy smelters and forges that are capable of building brilliant constructions in theory, but are entirely useless if your source of metal is miles across the map. You can carry ores great distances, but this is pretty inefficient as they're really heavy. So the next option is to build a cart. The cart has a storage space that allows you to shift great loads of material across the biome. Brilliant. This works for a bit, but what happens when you deplete your starting island? Well, you have two options. Either build a boat to transport the metals, or set up bases throughout the map. In the game I've been playing the most, we agreed that the best method was to build a network of portal connected bases throughout the map. This sounds like a lot of work, and it is, but it's also an incredibly fun problem solving exercise, and establishing a colony on a mysterious new biome is constantly exciting, always pushing to new unexplored frontiers. Speaking of which, you'll be doing most of your exploration out at sea. The game has some really interesting sea physics, with a working tidal system, storms, and varying weather-dependent wave sizes to come with it. You'll want to keep an eye out on the wind. The direction of it is always being displayed on the minimap. Quite frankly, there are very few games I've played that have equalled the sense of exploration that you get from embarking on the open seas in Valheim. But doing it with friends just blows it into the stratosphere. This is a game that begs to be played with friends. The devs knew what they were doing by letting players hold onto the mast for purely aesthetic purposes when on a boat. On the topic of aesthetics, the game is really lovely to look at. It employs a retro art style harkening back to the classic RuneScape, but puts it firmly in 2021 with some gorgeous lighting and shadows. Player animations are stiff, and the combat, whilst definitely not bad, is a bit clunky. The Norse mythology inspired enemies look great though, and each biome is distinct and has its own tone. Bosses are suitably epic too, and I was really happy to discover they all have a unique music track to go with them. The soundtrack's great by the way, breezy and calm near home, foreboding at night, and creepy in caves. It definitely improves the game atmosphere in an important way. I have at this point gotten through around half of what the game has to offer, and it just keeps on giving, even 30 hours in. Eventually, when I have finished the game in its current state, I will be making a follow-up video to this, where I will be looking at the whole game and go into a little bit more detail. Once the game is out of its early access state, you can have a look at the roadmap on their website. I will be looking at reviewing the game. The game is not done, and sometimes it shows, but this is absolutely worth the asking price. The core mechanics of the game are rock solid, and there is a shocking amount of content in what is actually an unfinished product. If I decided to stop playing Valheim right now, I would have gotten more than my money's worth. The fact that I still have so much to see is amazing.